now that you mention it. Thank you for reminding me. So I'm Michael Doge. I'm from the Library Services team. I hope many of you know me. I do see a lot of names that I don't know, so I hope those are people that are not librarians, because this is a partnership. We're hoping to meet the needs of librarians and those who are working on digital instruction. With that in mind, I'm just going to bring in some announcements of things that we're doing over the next couple of days before the break. We, first of all, thank you all for coming here and spending just a little bit of your time with us today, especially right before a break and everything's going crazy and everyone's trying to close up shop, prepare for before the break and for after the break. So we definitely appreciate you sharing this time with us. With that in mind, I'm just going to promote a couple of the things that we're doing to close up this week. Especially tomorrow. Tomorrow is a big day. Tomorrow we're having Ezra Jack Keats author visit from Haiwan Yum. It's a 45-minute program. We're encouraging people to do watch parties around it. We'll be running a Zoom webinar as well as a YouTube stream. So we encourage you to schedule meetings with your classes or invite your teachers to schedule meetings, give them the links, and enjoy the author visit. The books are available in Sora, which is linked in chat. And with that in mind, they will also advertise a couple of the resources we're working with right now. There's our Novel New York databases, free databases for all schools. That's at our Gale pages, along with some other ebooks that are not in Sora. There's a Discovery Education subscription available to all teachers and students right now. That link is also in chat. And then, of course, there's Sora, which we are literally adding onto daily, and usage is going through the roof. It's a citywide digital library purchased with central money, curated by the Department of Library Services, with input from the field. If you want to submit suggestions, then that's on our LibGuide, which I'm also linking in chat. So with that in mind, I also see my colleague Leanne Ellis is here. That's all of our announcements. Leanne, do you want to introduce? Or maybe she's not muted. Okay. So with that in mind, what we do, watch parties are something you can totally do with any time with any piece of material, particularly with Discovery Education. Discovery Education is great for doing watch parties, even if you're not doing the Ezra Jack Keats program tomorrow. We also have a series of civics literacy web PDs after the break. The first one is on February 23rd with Roger Rosen, who's the head of Rosen Publishing. And he's talking about building a diverse collection with a civics focus. And then we also have Kenneth C. Davis on March 23rd. So those are all on our PD calendar, which is on our LibGuide, Professional Learning. And that's all we've got. Welcome all, and I really look forward to discussing how we can do watch parties, which really meets a variety of needs that engages our students.
Awesome. All right. So thank you so much to Michael and the Library Services team. So really quickly, I am part of the Digital Literacy and Inclusion team at DIIT. My name is Laura Ogando, and I'm the Program Manager for Digital Literacy and Inclusion. I'm joined today by my colleague, Latiqua Spivey. She is our awesome assistant. She's on the back end, and she's going to be dropping in some helpful links and resources into the chat. So if you haven't done so already, please, please, please open up the chat. The chat is where it's at. She's not on the call today, but I always like to mention her. We have Lisa Nielsen, who's our Senior Director, and she has spearheaded a lot of the work that our office does. So I'd always just like to call her out. But as Michael keeps referencing, today is all about watch parties. So I'm going to pop out of our opening slide deck and take you right into our presentation today. So I see that we have several folks here in our Zoom room. And what I'm going to ask that you do right now is just kind of introduce yourself, just a quick hello. Tell us who you are and where you're coming from. I know that many of you are probably school-based, but if you happen to be from a central office, please let us know that as well. What particular grade or subject area you teach. I know that we probably have a lot of librarians, but every so often we have others that join us, and this is a partnership, as Michael said. So I'm hoping we have a good mix of folks here today. And then just a couple of things, because again, we are going to go over watch parties. So if you feel comfortable, feel free to share any and all of the following. if you've ever done a watch party before. Are you looking to do watch parties, say, maybe with your students or staff? And what potentially scares or excites you, and it can be both, about conducting watch parties? So I'll give you guys just a few moments here to respond in the chat. Let's see. Oh, awesome. We have a teacher from D79. That is so cool. We love all our alternative pathways, right, to graduation. I believe that's D79. Welcome to Diane and Katie, both librarians. Welcome to Anna. Let's see. We have Nicole. We have Joan Ann. Welcome to Joy. Yep. And you know what, Joy? Thank you for being so honest. I love that you're excited about doing this, but also feeling nervous because, like, there's going to be a lot of people, right? Anytime you do any type of event, whether it's, say, a watch party or even just a regular meeting, right? The minute you get like 100+ folks, or even sometimes 50, it's like, oh my goodness, that's a lot, right? And only natural to feel a little nervousness, right? Of like, I'm presenting to a large group. I don't want to mess it up. So I think after today's session, you're going to feel a lot more comfortable doing watch parties. And you know what? The other thing I want to say to you in terms of like not messing it up, listen, we're all working remotely. At least most of us are. I shouldn't say everyone, but most of us are working remotely. We've all had the tech challenges. Sometimes Zoom doesn't quite work or audio goes out. Like, you have to let go of the wanting it to be perfect. It's okay if there's a hiccup or two. Okay. We'll talk through some of the planning so that you can have a really great session. But if there's a hiccup or so, like, we have to let that go, because that's what it also means to be remote. Like, it's just not perfect. All right. I also want to welcome Eugene and Joanna. Joanna, I believe you were here last week. I'm seeing some names I remember. I think Jillian as well. So welcome. We've got Jean and Charlie and Kathleen. Awesome. All right. So, and I see Kathleen is totally taken on this Ezra Jack Keats event and wanting to do the watch party. So this is precisely why we did this way. We knew that folks were going to need some support with kind of conducting a watch party and making it so that it's effective, right? So that's what today is all about. All right. So we're going to get you covered. And right now, I want to just go over just some of the basics so that we understand exactly what we're doing. All right. So a watch party, just so that we're really, really clear, is when folks gather together in any online platform, right? And we'll talk some platform specifics in just a moment. But really, in any online platform, to watch a video or another type of digital content. And not only are you watching that digital content, all right, but you're interacting with each other while watching the digital content. And I think that's what makes a watch party important and special. Listen, we can watch videos all day long. In fact, it's definitely what some of our students are doing right now. But we really want to make sure that when we conduct a watch party, that we're making it feel like a useful, time together. Because let's face it, you can watch videos without a teacher. You can watch videos, without someone kind of moderating. So that's why we want to kind of be really specific as to why this, right? One, it's more fun to watch content together. Let's face it, right? It's better to watch content together because of that social factor, because you get to share ideas and collaborate. So that is one of the main features of watch parties. And we want to take advantage of that, because if all you're doing is just kind of passively watching a screen, but you're watching it together, not really the same thing. So we're going to talk about in just a moment how we can use watch parties as a way to share and collaborate. It's also a great way to share content that others may not have access to. And I bring this up with, say, things like doing a movie night, or sharing content that's maybe on a premium site. Now, you have to be careful. Yes, there are issues with copyright infringement, but when it comes to, and I actually did some research around this because someone asked me, conducting, like, say, a virtual movie night for your school, it's actually okay, because it's considered fair use. back when we, weren't in COVID times and COVID land, right? A lot of schools did like a monthly movie night at their school. It's perfectly okay, right? You're not charging money, you're not making money off of it. It's just more of a social like event. If that's what you're doing and you're doing at a school-based level, guess what? It's perfectly okay to stream Netflix. You just have to be careful how much you advertise it, and you certainly don't want to make money off of it. But again, because you're doing a watch party in that way, you're probably sharing content with some of your users that may not have an actual Netflix account. And let's not forget that videos. Oops, that's my Apple Watch thinking I'm talking to her. Let's also not forget that videos are a great learning tool. So we want to be using watch parties very strategically to make sure that our students and say our family community is getting the content they need in a medium that feels, effective, right? And that's all tied back to the sharing and collaborating and kind of the chat that goes around it. So we're not just passively watching, but let's talk more about that in a little bit. All right. So, a couple of things before you begin, because in order to have a really good watch party, you do need to set things up appropriately. All right. And the setup is actually really key in order to ensure that it runs smoothly. So, couple of things that you want to do to set yourself up. And it's really, this sounds, more complicated, but it's really more just 2 steps. All right. So step 1 is to just schedule your watch party. All right. Now we always get questions about preferred platforms. I am here to tell you, listen, they're all pretty good. All right. The big 3 that we hear a lot about are obviously Google Meet, Zoom, and Microsoft Teams. Our advice whenever you're scheduling anything in one of these platforms, go with the platform that your community feels the most comfortable in. So if you are a school that's kind of doing everything in Meet, you're making students check into virtual schooling in Google Meet. You've conducted, trainings in Google Meet. You've conducted parent meetings in Google Meet. Basically, what I'm saying is if like you're using Google Meet, don't do your watch party in Zoom. Because like, oh, I like Zoom. It's what I learned how to do watch parties in. That was the platform they used. I'd say stick with Meet. It's what your community knows. If your community feels more comfortable with Zoom, stick with Zoom. And again, if they feel more comfortable in Teams, stick with Teams. All right. It doesn't really matter the platform. Basically, all the platforms now have virtually the same features. So at this point, it's best to really just kind of think about what's going to be most helpful for your community. Now, when you schedule your platform, a couple of things to keep in mind. You want to give yourself a little bit of a buffer before like the main show is going to start. So if you know that, you're doing this event and you want to start the video, say exactly at 1 p.m., you might want to tell people to get into the Zoom room at say 12:45 or even 12:50. It gives folks just a chance to kind of get in and get settled. And that's actually something that we do with these trainings, right? We say they start at 12, but really like we don't start until like 12:10, 12:15 because we start with some updates first. And that's actually very intentional. We want folks to have a moment to get settled, make sure they're in the right spot. Get any technical issues addressed before anything starts, right? It's also a good chance to network, right? Some folks like to get in early and just see who's in the room. And typically, watch parties, depending on how you're structuring it, can be a little bit more fun in nature. So building in some time at the beginning for like that social networking piece is actually really, really nice. Now, on the back end of things, you also want to schedule some time after the event for some closing activities. This is where your discussion is going to take place. So again, if you're saying like, we're going to watch a video and that video is 30 minutes and I want to watch it from 1 to 1:30, then I probably am going to bookend, right, that virtual watch party session with 15 minutes in the beginning and 15 minutes at the end. So I might say this is a 12:45 to 1:45 session, but knowing full well that we're only going to watch the video from 1 to 1:30. All right. And that again gives you time before the meeting to get folks in, network, whatnot. And then after the video ends for you to do some discussing, any closing activities, and any kind of Q&A that you want to do, right? So give yourself that time at both the beginning and the end. And then step 2 is to make sure that you actually share this event link with your participants. Again, this might sound, like, duh, of course you got to share it. But you'd be surprised the amount of times folks are like, I don't have the link. I don't know how to join, right? I see it's on the calendar, but there's no link associated with it. So make sure you're sharing it properly with your participants. And again, depending on who you're doing this with, may look a little differently. If this is an event that you're doing where you want parents to join, where it's kind of really, really open, right, to your entire community, then it may be something that you want to post, say, on your school website. If your school maintains a Facebook, a Twitter, any type of social media, maybe you're going to post the information there. You may even promote it. So maybe you're tweeting out some things. Again, that is going to be a little different. If this is something you're just doing with your students as part of, say, a virtual class session that you're having, then, probably just posting it in your Google Classroom and doing whatever you do to just kind of ensure that students enjoy your virtual class anyway is probably going to be fine. When you share this information, you want to highlight what's going to be shared, right? So what are you going to get out of this watch party? Why should people attend? From the first 2 sessions we had last week and the week before, that it's really best if you can have an agenda, right? And we talked about why agendas are so important, but all that information can go can't talk, in an agenda, right? So, what are you watching? Why are you watching it? What you're doing, right, by watching this video. The other nice thing to do in preparation for a watch party is to create some of that activity, right? So polls, trivia, questions that you want to share with folks, right? So those are nice things to do. And then if you're sharing pre-recorded content, right? Super important to review that content. You want to make sure that everyone kind of is, on the same page, and that you've kind of reviewed stuff, exactly if it makes sense where you might pause and talk more. But if it's possible, to kind of preview that content, that's best. Now, if it's a live watch party that you're doing, obviously not something you can preview, but then you, as the facilitator of the event, want to note where maybe some good discussion questions are going to come from. So as things are kind of happening and being shared on the screen, you as the facilitator should take notes and say, ooh, this is a nugget that I want to ask folks once the video ends, right? Or once it's time for us to discuss. So just kind of keep that in mind. All right. So a couple of things to also ensure yourself for success. And I say this, to really just remind you that setup is so key, right? Ensuring that your meeting is set up, all that good stuff, but even like your own equipment. So really important that you test everything beforehand. Make sure that everything you need is open in a separate tab. And just for transparent facilitation, I'm going to pop out again so that you can see when I teach any type of training, I literally open up a new window and I have everything that I'm going to need. So I have my opening slide deck, which is what we share at the beginning. This is my training deck. I have the agenda for our session today. I did happen to sign into my Zoom, and then I opened up a couple of links that Michael shared, right? But this is not my real window. I'm one of those 40 tabbers, okay? No judgments, please. I get the feeling some of you are also 40 tabbers, right? But this is why you wouldn't want to do that, because every so often, you know how it goes, you lose your tab. And sometimes that can be really detrimental, because not only do you lose your tab, but now you're frantically trying to figure out, wait, which tab? And, some of us, because again, we've got 40 tabs open, we start opening tabs and clicking on them, and we may have sensitive information on that screen that we don't want folks to share. So really important that you open the links that you're going to need in a separate window, have the tabs that you will need open. The other thing too to keep in mind is that when you are sharing your screen, you can also you can select what to share. So I typically share an entire like window. I don't typically share my entire desktop. And that's just a slightly different setting. But again, that means that if I need to pop out of here, like right now, I can look at my Teams and I can kind of quickly side chat Michael if I really needed to, and he's not going to see that. Or I should say, you're not going to see that I'm doing that. So that's the reason why you might not want to share your full desktop is again, you may have stuff on there that you wouldn't want everyone to see. And yes, Joanna, I love that tip that you are sharing. Definitely helpful to pin a tab because yes, nothing is worse than, right? I didn't pin it. And now, I don't know, like I closed something I didn't mean to. Oh, I X'd out of it. It's actually really, really easy. And I can show folks how to do it right now. So as you see here, I'm in the Chrome browser. And if I go up to the top where it says tab, there is an option in that drop down menu that says pin tab. And when I do that, notice how now my tab moves all the way to the front of my window and it doesn't have the X. So notice how this tab now has the X and I can click out of it, but this tab no longer has the X. That is absolutely a very helpful little tip, especially if you find yourself, managing a lot of tabs. Yep. Spoken like a true 40 plus tabber for sure. You know this little trick. So it definitely is helpful. And you can do that for a lot of things, whether you're hosting a watch party, presenting anything, pin your tab. It prevents you from closing it. All right. Couple of other things you want to do. So you want to test that audio, camera, any of your devices. And then again, seems pretty intuitive, but have what you need right at your fingertips, right? And I don't mean just your digital devices, but also, cup of coffee, tea, water, snack, whatever. I have learned that the hard way from the beginning of the pandemic when I realized like, oh no, I'm in the middle of a training and I have no water next to me, right? And I can't really just hop over to the kitchen, right? If I'm in the middle of a training. So it's good to also think through like, what are things that you need to do? Also, don't forget like right beforehand, again, seems just like really you need someone to tell you to do this, but do it because you don't realize till afterwards. But take your bio break, right? Go to the bathroom, set yourself up so that you are ready, right? Both with the technology, but also with your own self. All right. So important that we check in and make sure that we are actually physically ready. Then for you as the facilitator, it's also really helpful if you join your session a few minutes early. So again, going back to my example, I know I'm showing my video from 1 to 1:30. I've scheduled our watch party from 12:45 to 1:45. That's what's on, the invite. That's what everyone is expecting. I might join my meeting at 12:40. Again, just a few more minutes earlier, but it's really just so that I'm there. I've got everything I need. I've got like my setup, I've got the agenda, I've got my slide deck. I've got everything. I set up my separate window. I've got all my tabs, right? This is just, again, for you as the facilitator who's going to be kind of, taking on this work so that you're all ready and set to go. And that way, as folks trickle in at 12:45, right, you're allowing participants to introduce themselves, do a little, socialization, get familiar with the platform if for some reason they aren't. And then this will also allow you to identify any of those tech problems and do a little troubleshooting with folks if they need it. I know I've done that before, like I can tell someone's having trouble muting themselves, right? So if I know that right in the beginning, because they've joined, I can say like, oh, it's this icon right here up at the top, or, oh, you know what? It sounds like you're on 2 devices, make sure you join from 1. It's simple things like that. But again, when you join your session early, you're all set to go and then you can help others. We've talked about this before in our previous session, but again, having a nice presentation deck, even if you are just sharing a video, you can have what we call like an opening slide deck. Again, I'm going to pop out and show you. Here's our opening slide deck for Lit PDs. We literally reuse this every single time because this is a recurring meeting, but it just has a few slides, right? We have our housekeeping slide. We welcome the various teams that are joining, and it's just again some really quick information. At the opening slide, we include our information. We have some links to places that we want folks to go. So if you can have an opening slide, that's nice too. Again, you might be, for the most part of your session, just sharing your screen and watching a video, and that's fine too. It doesn't need to be an extensive slide deck, but we find that having something that just lists like, hey, this is a watch party, right? It's the Ezra Jack Keats watch party. Putting in some of your important information, it just helps give structure, especially at the beginning of a class. Now let's get into how to run the watch party, right? So again, you're going to start your meeting, whichever platform, and then you're going to share your screen. Now, depending on the platform that you're using and also your own device, you may need to also share audio. I know that my boss, Lisa, oftentimes has to do this when she's in Teams. It's specific to Teams because then she doesn't really have to do this, I think, in Zoom. But when she clicks share screen, there's also something that tells her to share her audio. So if that's you, then you may need to do that. And it's funny because I never have to do that in Teams, but I'm on an Apple device. She is on a Chrome device. So again, it really just depends. This is why, though, testing your device beforehand is a really nice thing. And if you can test with just one other person, it's nice too, because then you're in the platform. You're like, okay, let me just run through this. I'm going to share my screen. Do you hear things, right? So all it takes is one other person. You can do this with another teacher. You can do it with a friend. It really doesn't matter who you test with, but that's why you test, because then you work out all these glitches and you figure out like, all right, this is what I need to do. Do also keep in mind with audio, sometimes you actually need to take your headset or earphones off for your audio to share. I typically have to do this. It doesn't, like, sometimes I'll have to disconnect my headset. If I have my AirPods in, same deal. So again, it just kind of depends. I wish there were a rhyme or reason to it. And it's so funny because I updated my, what is it? I got, what's the new Mac one? Big Sur. And I think with that Big Sur update, a lot of little things change. And the audio for me, I noticed like now I have to take my device, my headset out. And I didn't used to have to do that. So I don't know if it's like a Big Sur thing. I've just been blaming all sorts of things on Big Sur. I'm not the biggest fan of that update, but either way, again, play around with it, right? This is what you want to kind of test beforehand. Then obviously you're going to watch that content together. So if it makes sense, you're going to pause throughout, right? You're going to pause and kind of make sure that you are, facilitating discussion. Maybe you've got a poll that you're going to do. Maybe you're just using the chat feature to check in with folks. But, that is the crux of a watch party. It's that you're watching something, but it's the interacting with the folks who are watching with you that is so, so key. So even if you're watching it live, you know how it goes. People have thoughts. So are you utilizing the chat, and are you encouraging folks to utilize the chat as you are watching together? All right. So this is where we'll talk more through some of that and how we can facilitate the participation. So during your watch party, all right, you obviously want to help folks get prepared. So this is one of those things that when you launch your meeting, this is why you do housekeeping. You show folks where the chat is, where the mute is, the video, all that good stuff. And I'll share our housekeeping deck in just a moment. I'll share that with you. But you want to have that. All right. Don't assume that everyone just knows all the features of the platform. Sometimes you just need to review it. Before actually playing the video or starting the event, right? Convey some expectations. Again, this is where a housekeeping slide is going to be helpful. So things like keeping your mics muted, particularly for a watch party, right? We don't want folks having their mics on and kind of disturbing the audio of the video, right? So make sure that folks know protocols about muting their mics. utilizing the chat, and then how to ask for support, right? And this is so important. You need to tell folks, like, if you're stuck, if you're confused, this is what you're going to do. And we do that a lot. And that's also why I never teach alone, which I know is a huge luxury, but that is one of the main reasons that Latiqua is always with me, is that she can kind of take care of some of that, like, back end stuff if a user is having difficulty and I kind of need to, like, kind of facilitate more and make sure that we're underway. She can kind of chat with someone on the side and say, all right, let me help you, let's see what's happening. You want to frame the whole party, not just the watching part. So how does watching this video kind of fit in with the larger work that you're doing, right? Because let's face it, you're never just watching one video in isolation. Typically, you're watching a video as part of, like, a larger piece of work you're doing. It connects to the work of the unit. It connects to, some of the bigger goals of, say, your particular content area and your discipline. So make sure that your folks who are in this watch party know what this work is connected to. All right. And then we do have a housekeeping script. I'll open this up quickly. This is actually for you to make a copy of. So I'll go ahead and show you what that looks like. But I found it really helpful in the beginning to have a script. Like I said, at this point, I can pretty much recite this in my sleep. So if you are, like that, where you can recite it in your sleep, you probably don't need a script. But maybe if you've never done some of this before, you can go off of a script. It's just a few bullet points. And then we also have here, some specific information on if you're hosting in Teams versus Google Meet. So we put that in there. And again, you have access to that from our presentation. And I believe it is also linked in the agenda. All right, so here's that housekeeping script.
I don't think the agenda was dropped into chat or the presentation. Could you possibly do that now by any chance?
Absolutely. Latiqua is going to get on that for us. All right, so here is that housekeeping. And do keep in mind, this is a housekeeping for Teams, because our office likes to use Teams a lot, but we have one for Zoom, and I'll also link that in our agenda. But this is where you'd want to show folks, right? Here is the chat, right? Here is the raise your hand feature. Here's emojis, here's GIFs. I like people to know where that stuff is. And particularly if you're using Teams, one of the reasons I really like Teams is because you can use things like emojis and GIFs. So I always like to point that out literally at the beginning of a training. I'm like, guys, we're in Teams, which means we can add GIFs. Let's do it. And some folks literally are like, wait, you can do that? Like, it's like no one has ever told them that before, and they don't spend a lot of time kind of playing around with the platform. So they just don't know, right? You don't know what you don't know. So sometimes you just literally have to call it out for folks. And it's nice because, again, today we're in Zoom. So I showed you our Zoom housekeeping, which looks almost similar to this, but I point out where the reaction buttons are. So this is why a housekeeping slide is really nice, especially right at the beginning, because it gets folks acclimated with the platform. Again, even if you've only been using, Google Meet, or you've only been using Zoom, some folks just don't take the time to actually learn the platform, so they don't know, right? They just think like, all right, I'm here and I'm in it and that's it. And they don't realize that there's a whole bunch of other stuff they could actually be doing. All right. And then things to do in a watch party, right? What are we actually doing? This is the important piece of it. Well, you're obviously watching the video. That goes without saying. All right. But the bigger thing to do, as I keep mentioning, is to use the chat to comment on the video and share ideas and opinions. And one way to do this is you can have viewers respond to prompts both orally and in the chat. And this is going to depend on how you're setting up your watch party. If it's something live, then obviously you want to save that for maybe afterwards. But if it's pre-recorded content, then you can certainly do some pre-planned, like stop and jots or stop and turns, turn and talks. Like, folks have different names for it, but that's essentially what you're doing. You've got some strategic points where you're going to pause that video and you're going to ask folks to share. And we've got a couple of ways that you can do this. We're going to share one of our protocols, which is the frame, focus, follow-up protocol. You can also just keep things pretty simple and generic, prompt folks to say, is anyone else surprised, confused, having a certain reaction to the content that we're watching, right? So you can do things like that. You can also use polls to keep folks engaged. So Zoom has a nice polling feature. So, you can quickly, when you get to a certain point, you can launch a poll and have folks respond that way. And then once the presentation is over, you definitely want to start a discussion. And this is a time where you're really unpacking the work from the party, right? From the watch party. And depending on how you structure this, you can tell folks that if they want to contribute, to raise their hand and unmute their mics. But also keep in mind that some folks are going to feel more comfortable in the chat, which is why you want to use the chat. All right. So it's helpful to use the @ symbol to tag specific people and respond to others. What I will say is that in Zoom, you can use the @ symbol, but it doesn't actually tag them. But it's kind of nice because, again, the chat, depending on how many folks you have in a particular call, the chat can get pretty active, particularly when you're asking for folks to share an opinion, to share reactions, to comment. So it's nice if you want to respond to someone specific, just use the @ symbol. I know in Teams specifically, it will tag the person, but not so much in Zoom or Meet. The other thing to keep in mind, and I showed this to you a moment ago, but many of the platforms have the ability to react and comment to others. You can even share files. So, that's something nice that if you can do to incorporate. And then, as I mentioned a moment ago, some folks are never going to feel comfortable coming onto their mic. They just don't want to do it that way. So, this is where you, as a facilitator, you're going to need to mind both, the participants that want to share and they've raised their hand and they want to come off of mute, and also the folks who are always just going to stick to the chat, and that's where they feel comfortable. All right. You want to honor both because, again, some folks are just not going to come off of mute. All right. So here is the promised frame, focus, and follow up protocol. And we're actually going to practice this in just a moment. But it's nice to have a protocol for watching videos because, again, we don't want folks passively watching videos. And I can't say that enough. And that's sometimes, I think, the way a watch party can go if it's not properly planned. It can feel very much like a passive experience. So instead, you want to kind of build in that activity, right? You want folks to actively watch a video. So this is adapted from PBS Learning Media. And I believe it's linked in the agenda. So if you want to see more about this, and I know that Latiqua just shared our agenda. So when you are sharing a video, you want to frame the video. All right. So that means you want to provide context so that your viewers pay attention to the main content of the video. So, you don't need to provide a whole, big frame, giving people, a page worth of, synopsis and description. Like, that's too much. But you just kind of want to set it up. Hey, we're going to be watching a video and it's going to be all about, Maya Angelou, right? And her life. Maybe that's what your video is about. Your focus is something that you're going to leave your viewers kind of to be on the lookout for, right? So maybe, I might tell my audience, hey, we're going to watch this video about Maya Angelou. I want you, as you're watching, to pay attention to the really key factors that led her to become an author, right? Maybe that's what the video is really focusing on. And so I'm really going to want you to pay attention because the video highlights those for us. And then the follow-up is where you're going to invite your audience to summarize and build upon the ideas from other participants. And usually a follow-up might be a question that you're going to ask once the video is over. So it's a nice thing to do to say, all right, we're watching this Maya Angelou video. I want you to pay attention to, the different influences that led her to becoming an author. And when the video is done, I'm going to ask you which influence you think played the biggest part, right? It's that simple. Your frame, your focus, and your follow-up don't need to be extensive, but they give your viewer, right, something to do while they watch. It gives me a task. It's like, all right, here's what I'm watching, here's what I'm looking out for, and here's the follow-up question, right? Because sometimes without that direction, you know how it goes with students. They're just now just kind of watching, right? And it becomes like, all right, I'm watching, but I have no task while I watch. And therefore I get a little sidetracked. This keeps them focused. So let's actually practice this. I am going to play a video for us. All right. Now, let me also, again, be fully transparent. Any type of video that I would plan for, I typically probably watch it a couple of times. I'm not going to lie. If it's a longer video, I might replay certain sections just for me so that as I'm taking notes and kind of figuring out where I'm going to pause and whatnot. But this is a quick video. It's just under 2 minutes. And what I want you to do as we watch, all right, I want you to identify what might be the frame, the focus, and the follow-up that you would tell folks who were watching this video about. And then what we'll do is once the video is over, I'll have you pop those into the chat. And we're going to treat this like we're planning for an actual session. Again, this is a 2-minute video. So your job right now is to watch it and try and figure out what you think a good frame, focus, and follow-up for this video would be.
As we begin the new school year, MCPS will provide an engaging virtual learning experience for all students. To optimize your learning, here are some helpful tips. Live instruction will occur throughout the day and week, so time management is important. Wake up, have breakfast, and be ready to start a day of virtual learning, just like a regular school day. There will be time for meals and breaks. Take advantage of those opportunities to stretch and step away from your Chromebook. Find a comfortable and organized space, free of distractions to work in. Learn to say no to friends and family when you have work to complete. Virtual classroom time is not the right time to browse social media, play games, or watch videos. It's important to stay focused, like you would in a traditional classroom. Avoid falling behind. Coursework is much more manageable if you complete tasks each and every day. Your teachers are here to help you. Be active, participate, and ask questions. Teachers and staff will be available for additional live academic and/or social emotional support. We look forward to seeing you in the virtual classroom and know that working together, we will have a great school year. For the most up-to-date information about the Fall Recovery Plan, please visit the MCPS website and search Recovery.
All right. So I noticed Michael dropping in its ideas for frames and focus. Isn't it foci? Into the chat. So foci, that's right. Oh, so I'd love to hear from other folks. And again, there's no right or wrong to these. It truly is what you're trying to get folks to kind of do with the video that you're sharing and the digital content that you're sharing. So I don't want you to think that there's a right or a wrong. But the frame, and I like the way Michael put it, making virtual learning natural, right? Your frame is just basically like what the video is in a nutshell. So you can see here, like the title of this video was like tips for student success for virtual learning. That's what this is. So I might frame it with like, hey, we're going to watch a video today and it's all about, being successful with virtual learning or making virtual learning feel natural. That's all you would need to say, right? It's not a huge synopsis. It just kind of sets the video up. And then your focus is like, what are you going to focus on? So in this video, I might say, hey, in this really quick video, they're going to share 5 tips for how to be really successful, right? And I see some folks kind of starting to add that into the chat. So that's one focus, but maybe that's not what I want students to focus on, right? Maybe I'm going to have you focus on what are some things you notice from the video that are things you already do. Maybe that's my focus. So that's what I'm trying to get at, is that there's no right or wrong to this work. It's what you're trying to get out of the video, right? That you want your students and your audience to really get out of it. And Alona, you're absolutely right. Students internalize content in various ways. That's why providing these kind of prompts, it gets them to like kind of really focus their thinking. And you want to, value all the student responses, right? Yep. And then, your follow up could be like a discussion on what teachers and students need. Maybe your follow up is like, hey, what's a tip that, you found really helpful for you, right? Like I could easily see some kids watching this and going, ooh, I don't do enough time management. Like that's really hard for me, right? I don't manage my time. I'm always rushing. I'm always feeling like I'm not in class right at the start. I don't always know when class is happening, right? I always say, in terms of the follow up, it should feel a little bit more open ended, because that's where you want some of the discussion to happen. So that should be where like students are really taking the content from the video and thinking about like, what's my opinion, what's my belief, and how are the two kind of going together, right? What was shared in the video and my opinions, and am I possibly learning something about myself because I've watched this video? So that I always find is a good follow-up question. If you're asking something where students are moving away from the video and thinking like, how can I take the content that I just learned and apply it to my own life? And Kathleen, that's a great one. Which strategies do you already do, right, that were highlighted in the videos, and which ones maybe you need to work on? I also really love, especially when they show like list of things, like videos that show like, here's, we've identified, 5 tips for this or this many tips for this. I always like to go like to my students particularly, do you think they left out a tip, right? Like what's a tip that you would add, or what's one that you feel like they got to take away, right? And that's another nice like conversation starter. But as I think you guys are noticing, right, this protocol is nice because it gets your students really talking about videos. And I think that's something that's a skill, right? We have to teach how to talk about videos the same way in which we would teach students to talk about their reading, right? We want kids to talk about the books they read and the thoughts they have. We need to build that skill in for videos, because sometimes our students don't treat video content the same way. They think like, oh, it's video watching time, it's fun time, right? Not realizing that there's a whole lot of literacy work happening, just the same as when we read a book. So let me get to my next slide, because I want to kind of just debrief this. We already kind of did this first part, which is kind of sharing our different frame, focus, and follow-up questions. But now I want to get metacognitive about it, right? Let's think about our thinking. So what was easy or difficult about writing some of these prompts? And how might a protocol like this help you as you begin to plan your lessons and incorporating watch parties? So I'll give you just a moment for that. Sandra, there is an attendance that we're going to share at the end. This session ends at 1:15, so that is when we will share our attendance. So while I'm assuming some folks are furiously typing into the chat, one of the things that I will actually identify about, that is maybe ever so slightly difficult in writing prompts is that you really do need to watch the video. And I told you beforehand, we were only going to watch the video once. But truth be told, if I were actually planning this out, like I said, I'd watch the video just a couple of times, right? Once probably isn't good enough. I want to watch it so that I'm really preparing myself for like, what are my frame, focus, and follow-up questions? If it's a longer video, again, this was really short, so I really wouldn't want to pause it. But I remember like when I was in the classroom and I would show brain pop videos. Brain pop videos tend to be anywhere between like 4.5 minutes to sometimes 6 minutes. Even though that's still a short amount of time, I would pause brain pop videos because in that 6-minute period, there's a lot of content. So I might pause like every minute and a half or so. So that's why like I find it to be really beneficial to watch that video several times, to really figure out like, where am I going to ask kids to really focus on? And what is going to be a good follow-up question that's going to lead to a rich discussion? Because that's the other thing. I don't want to ask questions that are pretty obvious, right? Especially my follow-up. My follow-up should never be a yes or a no. My follow-up should have some sort of discussion aspect to it, where I'm either having to defend my opinion, I'm having to share why I believe what I believe. There may be somewhat of a debate to it, right? But you want to design particularly your follow-up question to be one in which, it's not a yes or a no, it's not a right or a wrong, it's more discussion based. Yep. And oh my gosh, that's a great way of putting it. You schedule the learning and the doing. Absolutely. That is absolutely what we're trying to get at, right? And, when we talk about, not that this should be the focus of why you're doing this, but when we talk about, getting observed by our admins, right? This is what you talk about in a debrief, right? Because I used to show a lot of videos when I was in the media center, and I wanted my admin to see that, like, I was never just showing videos for the sake of showing videos. It was very educational. It was fully planned, the same way you would plan a read aloud. Like the way I used to plan read alouds, I'd have little post-its, in my book. I knew when I was doing a think aloud. I knew when I was doing a turn and talk, when I was going to kind of linger, like I had all those moments really, really planned out. And I did the same thing with my video. It was like the sense of like, I'm really going to make sure that we're unpacking the content in a video similarly to the way we'd unpack the content in a printed text. Digital literacy is literacy. Let's not forget that, right? So you want to make sure that we're taking the time to, with some of our really, really meaty content, to schedule that learning and the doing. Absolutely. All right. So let's keep going. Because a couple of best practices to share as well. All right. So when you're sharing your screen, particularly for a longer watch party, it actually might be helpful to turn your camera off to save some bandwidth. Again, I just shared a 2-minute video. So no, I didn't turn my camera off, but sometimes it's helpful. Like I said, I'd say anything longer than 10 minutes, you typically want to turn a camera off. It also gives you a chance, like, let's face it, we're all doing this in some sort of virtual sense. We might be having a snack while we're, watching our video or our content. So another reason, if you feel more comfortable while you're sharing your screen and playing the content, go ahead and turn your camera off. That's perfectly fine. It may also be helpful to have a second device. And we talked a little bit about this last week when I did my part 2 of remote facilitation class, right? So, when you're sharing a video, right? And anytime you're really sharing your screen, you lose a lot of the ability to moderate the chat. It's a little different in Zoom because you can pull up the chat box, but with some of the other platforms, it's not as easy. So for that reason, you may want to open up your meeting in a second device and join just as the participant. That way you kind of see what your participants are seeing, and then you also have the ability for the chat. And then if you don't have another laptop, because I get it, like, some of us don't have everything we need, right? Remember that your other device can actually also be a smartphone. You don't need it to be a laptop. It can be a smartphone. It can also be, if you have a tablet as well. That's also helpful. If you have that second device and you are joining, don't forget you need to be muted on your second device. So I'm toggle between 2 devices right now. I've got this window that I'm sharing with you guys in my Zoom meeting here, but you may have also noticed, if you look in the participant list, you may also notice that there's a second one of me, right? That's actually my laptop. And it actually, I'm pretty sure I labeled it So it actually should say Laura Ogando's laptop, but that's intentional because I like to see what you guys are seeing. It also allows me to keep the chat open. So that's why I do that. But do know that I'm not sharing my audio on the second device. And this is where second devices can get tricky. So if you're not, necessarily too comfortable with this setup, don't do it because you'll get god awful feedback and echoing, and it'll just be just awful. So you as a presenter and a facilitator, what works best for you. If this is just not your wheelhouse, not a big deal. All right. And then when possible, again, I know this is a big luxury, but when possible, have a colleague or even a trusted student to help moderate the chat. So that's what Latiqua does for me. She helps moderate the chat. Her and I are typically always in training sessions, but Latique was always just in the chat, kind of posting my links. You guys heard it earlier today when it's like, oh, we don't have the presentation, we don't have the agenda, and I quickly pinged her and said, Latiqua, can you drop those in? So that is why we do that. All right. If you don't have another adult, because again, we're short staffed as it is, right? Remember that it can also be a student. I mean, I come from the elementary world. We're big on jobs, right? We had the attendance monitor and the paper passer and the lunch monitor who would all, pass out all the lunches right before we had to go to lunch. Make this a job. I wouldn't say this is appropriate for like your littlest ones, but even I would say possibly even a third grader who's pretty good with it. If all you need is just someone in the chat dropping your links, that's a job. You train a kid to do it, you're good to go. All right. So just get creative with it. But I'm telling you right now, having that second person, super helpful. All right. And again, if especially if you're at the middle and high school level, pull in that kid who needs a job, who's tech savvy, and make them your second person. I'm telling you, they'll love it. It'll make them feel important. And then it can be a rotating job. So it's not always the same student. All right, so now we've gotten to that point where we've done the watch party, right? We watched the great content. We've got all this good stuff swimming around in our brain. What do we do afterwards? All right. So after the watching, you want to have time to reflect on your content and discuss. And remember, I told you that when you were setting up your watch party, you should have some buffer time at the beginning and some time at the end, right? Because you're not just setting up a watch party to watch the video and then you're done, right? It's over. We need that reflection time. So there's a couple of ways to structure that reflection time. You can have some time to share ahas, right? That would be things like new learning and ideas, maybe concepts that are like really meaty and you're still processing, right? You're just kind of like, still trying to chew the fat on this one, and this is where it's helpful to have that discussion, because that's where sometimes kids, because they're listening to other students and other folks share, it helps solidify what they're thinking, right? So having a time to share those ahas, those concepts that also really resonate with you, can be a nice way to solidify the learning. You can also share some appreciations, right? So it could be something that you appreciated that was said, something that really mattered to you. Maybe the video you picked just really hit home for folks. Something that you're grateful for, right? That was shared again in that video. We're heading into, or I should say, we're already in February. It's such an important month. It's Black History Month. I also know that starting tomorrow, we've got the beginnings of, or I'm sorry, not tomorrow. At the end of this week, we've got our Respect for All week, and so we are planning activities. I think Friday is No One, or wait, that was last Friday. I'm getting all confused. Last Friday was No One Eats Alone. This week is all Respect for All week. But, this is where you could be sharing a video to really kind of go along with that content. And you're going to get folks that are appreciating things that are said. So highlighting that is always nice. And then share those actionable steps, right? So because you watch this video together, maybe you're going to commit to doing something. Again, it depends on the video that you're sharing. Not every video is going to have an actionable step, but the one that I just modeled with a moment ago, right? we might say, because we just watched that tip video, what's a tip that you're really going to commit to, right? Maybe it's the one thing you don't do enough of, and so you're going to commit to doing that more, right? All right, and I'm just looking into the chat, Lorna. I'm seeing your question about sound. So if a video doesn't have sound at all, yeah, it doesn't have sound. And that can be something that you also include in your frame. Like there are certain videos that there's just no sound. It's just it's almost like a montage of pictures. If that's the case, you might want to tell folks that so that they know that like, hey, it's not your audio being funny. There's no sound to this video. I would make sure to tell folks that. If you're having audio issues, that's slightly different, right? Because you do want the audio to be on. Now, I will say this. Every once in a while, I do all my testing, and I should have said this before. I do all my testing. My device, everything, we're good to go. And then, of course, day of meeting, it doesn't work. There are some things you can do in a pinch. Turn on closed captioning. That's always nice. You actually saw it with the video I shared. There was closed captioning, so that's a nice workaround. But listen, the tech issues are going to happen. If it's a short video, then you might want to tell folks, listen, I'm turning on the closed captioning, follow along with the closed captioning. If it's a longer video, you might want to pause and say, so sorry, folks, we're having some technical difficulties. Give us a moment to troubleshoot. All right. But yeah, I see that you're saying, yeah, the video doesn't have sound. So if a video doesn't have sound, just say it doesn't have sound. That's actually helpful. And sometimes videos have sound, but it's just like, instrumental. It's more just for like the prettiness of it. You can also say that too. You can say, listen, we're going to watch a video, but just know the sound really isn't important. It's background tunes. It's fine. Pay attention to the content on your screen. There's going to be some important information shared through the visuals as opposed to the audio. All right.
Laura, can I chime in for a second?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, you just want to make sure that that whatever you're doing, if it doesn't have sound, that there's some way of accessing the content for kids that might not be able to follow with the images, that especially if it's quick images, like one scene after another flashing by. Kids might need time to process, need it to be accessible. So you might want to have an alternate in case kids need that audio to guide them through what they're watching.
Yeah.
Some kids have processing issues.
And to go with that, if that's the video that you've picked and identified, then that's also probably a good place for you to plan some strategic pausing, right? Because if I know this video is going to cycle through images and cycle through fairly quick, then I can on my end say, you know what, I'm going to slow it down. I'm going to pause, right? And I'm going to be super intentional about giving my students some time to linger on a particular image. All right. And just like Anna's saying in the chat, that's all part of the frame, right? That's giving folks, when you frame the video, you're telling folks what to anticipate. So absolutely, if a video doesn't have audio, that's part of the frame. You want to say like, hey, this video doesn't have audio. It's just images. So you're going to want to pay close attention to the images. All right. So, oh yeah, I'm sorry. So let's demo this work. We're ready for our demo. So here's what we're going to do right now. We're going to watch another really quick video. You're going to see when I advance to the next screen, I have a frame, a focus, and a follow-up. I'm going to run through each of these. And we're going to practice this like I was really doing this with you, okay? And then after we watch, I am going to pull you back together and I'm going to ask you that follow-up question. All right. And because I want to really match the way I would do this, and I see that we're only 30 something, I'm going to ask that folks, if they want to share verbally, they can raise their hand and unmute. However, if you want to stay in the chat, you're welcome to do that as well. All right. But let's actually demo this and practice what this might look like. So we are going to watch a video called The 7 Keys to Creative Collaboration. This video highlights the various elements for effective teamwork. So as you watch, I want you to focus on the 7 keys of collaboration that this video identifies. I want you to think to yourself, do you agree with this list? And when we're done watching, I'm going to ask you what you might add or take away from the list that they've presented. All right. So that is our frame, focus, and follow up. I'm going to hit the play button. And when we're done, remember, I'm going to ask you that follow up question.
We've all had times when group work failed. People missed deadlines, failed to communicate, and didn't learn from mistakes. But chances are you've also been part of a team when you accomplished something epic together that you could have never done on your own. So what makes this creative collaboration work effectively? Well, here are 7 ideas. Number 1, ownership. Members need to be empowered from the start. Here they can solve problems, generate ideas, and design systems that lead to success. Number 2, dependability. Creative collaboration requires members to hit their deadlines and develop creative endurance. Number 3, trust. When members trust one another, they work interdependently. Here they genuinely listen to one another and assume the best in each other. Over time, they become transparent and even vulnerable. Number 4, structure. The structure should be loose and flexible, but you need to have structure in creative collaboration. It needs to exist. This is why I love design thinking. It's a flexible framework for getting the most out of the entire creative process. Number 5, a shared vision. I'm not referring here to vision statements that you put on a wall or slap on your website. I'm thinking more in terms of a sense of direction. It's a shared desire, a goal that you're aiming for, and a picture of what you will produce. Number 6, fun. The best collaborative groups I've been a part of are the ones where you want to be together. They laugh, they play together, and this can actually boost both convergent and divergent thinking. Number 7, candor. This is one of the big takeaways from Creativity Inc., a book by one of the co-founders of Pixar. It's the idea that groups need to be honest about what's working and what's failing. And this honesty allows you to adjust and iterate and ultimately create something awesome.
All right. So as promised, hold on here.
We've all had times when...
All right. So I want to go back to my follow-up. So we just watched this video together. Here's what I want us to now do. Remember, we're acting like you are all my participants. So I want you to take that participant role of what might you add or take away from this list. So we've watched this video on the 7 keys to creative collaboration. And my follow-up to all of you is, what are you going to add or possibly take away from this list? And this is, when you're asking a question like this is where it can become, discussion based. Different students, anyone really is going to have a slightly different take on this, right? I'm hearing the crickets. So it's okay if, if you didn't happen to write down, when with a video like this and with it being as short, the goal for you wasn't to like furiously take notes or things like that. And I'm seeing in the chat, yep, sometimes you need to watch it more than once. Absolutely true. A video this short, I might watch it twice. But at the same time, that's why we also go through the focus and the follow-up. I told you to pay close attention to those 7 keys. And the way this video kind of goes, it quickly tells you like, all right, first key, group work. Second key, we need structure. Third key. So, that's why things like this are nice. But yes, you're absolutely right. Doing a second viewing particularly for a very short video, is somewhat helpful. You can also, again, choose to, because this is pre-recorded, right? I've got the ability to hit pause and play. I can pause. So maybe at each kind of element, because there were 7, after each element, I quickly pause and do a quick check-in, like, all right, what are we thinking, right? And yep, you can, I mean, notes, I go back and forth with this. I think, I think it's all in the way we like tell students to take notes, because I don't like the busy work aspect of it, but it's also important to kind of be able to document your thoughts so that you can share it out afterwards. So I think, we need to teach into note taking is what I'm trying to say. I don't like when kids are like, oh, I just got to write down what I hear. And then they just end up with like a bunch of words on a page and it doesn't mean a whole lot. All right. But also looking at the chat. All right. And I see, so Charlie's saying that dependability was key for me. It's important to be able to rely on your team for an entire group effort. Absolutely. And Ron, we can share the presentation again, but you'll also see down here where I'm hovering my mouse, we've got this QR code and we've got this shortened URL. If you type that in, or if you scan the QR code, it will take you to our presentation. And all right, here we go. All right, so as you can see, watch parties can be really, really great. I particularly love them because, again, we're all watching videos, right? Like, let's be very, very real. Everyone is watching videos during this time. I mean, and this has nothing to do with it being remote or not remote. We like to be able to watch. It's more in like the how are we supporting the watching, right? What discussions do we have, and how are we going to make that discussion feel really worthwhile, right? Because that's where the learning and the doing kind of happen, right? So that's really, really important for watch parties, because if all you're doing is watching, that's half of what a watch party really should be. The other half is like that discussion piece of it. It's where you're sharing your opinion, where you're talking about the learning. All of that has to happen too. So I want to give some time to the folks here. If you would like, please feel free to either contribute in the chat. You're absolutely welcome to do that. Or if you would like, you can unmute and share that way as well. And Kathleen, in terms of like a live watch party versus, I mean, there's not too much. I mean, when I went over like the technical aspects, the same apply. Kind of having like the links that you need and that you want to share, like that's really important. Have that ready. And then, so it sounds like you're using Google Meet. So if you're using Google Meet, have everything ready that you need to have ready. Do some of that testing stuff. So test out your devices, make sure you know what you need to do in order to share audio, in order to share your video. But it doesn't really matter. Like what I just did right now, showing a YouTube video, I wouldn't change it up a whole lot if I were showing a live video. So if that's what you're wondering, there's not a whole lot different. Any other questions? Yep, and we will be doing CTLE, so I see that as well. So in just a moment, my colleague Latiqua is going to drop a link into the chat. We are going to do our attendance. So we always wait till the end because we do want to ensure that folks actually stay. So what you're going to see from Latiqua is she's going to drop a link to our attendance sheet. You're going to fill that out. And then what's going to happen afterwards is you are going to get a follow-up email. In that follow-up email is going to be a link to a Survey Gizmo survey. You're going to fill out that survey, give us real feedback. We always take our feedback into account. This class is how to host a watch party. In fact, let me open up the attendance sheet because we always have a lot of classes. So down here under sessions, they are for the most part alphabetically organized. So we are in that how to host a watch party. That is this session today. All right. And then you fill in all the other pertinent information, email, all that good stuff. And then our sessions are 75 minutes. So you can go ahead and fill that out. And once you hit submit, we have all your information. Like I said, then you will get that follow-up email from our office. We are the Office of Digital Literacy and Inclusion, but the email address will say digital accessibility. That's us. All right. People always get a little confused, but that is us. You'll get a link inside that email to a Survey Gizmo survey. Give us real feedback. Let us know what we could improve upon, do better. And then if you need CTLE, it's one of those things like it asks you, do you need CTLE? You hit the checkbox. Yes, you do. And then you fill out a couple more fields. I think the last 4 of your social, what does your name look like and teach so that we match. And that's basically it. All right. And if there's any other questions, please, please, please feel free. You can pop them into the chat, or if you feel comfortable, you can certainly take yourself off mute and ask right into the microphone. I'm fine with it. But once you fill out the attendance link, you're actually done with today's session. I know that folks have to hop, you're teaching, you've got class. I totally get it. So feel free. You don't have to, apologize for leaving early. You do what you got to do. All right. But again, I want to say thank you to all of you who are coming. Please feel free. Send this along to your fellow educators within your school, teacher friends that are outside of your school. We are kind of marketing this to librarians, but this really is a partnership between Library Services and our office, the Office of Digital Literacy and Inclusion. And so we don't discriminate. We're very much about, the more, the merrier. We like to kind of fill our Zoom room. All right. So feel free to share this with any of your colleagues. We love to be able to present content that you can use in your classroom. So watch parties are not unique to one particular type of teacher. We think anyone can benefit from a good watch party. And I see a lot of thank yous in the chat. I want to thank all of you. Thank you for taking time out of your day to get smarter, take in some PD. We know that you guys are always stretched thin. I mean, teachers are doing everything and then some. So a big thank you to all of you for showing up, for being here and participating. Hopefully, if you are participating in that Ezra Jack Keats watch party tomorrow, you feel a little bit more confident to do so. And hopefully you also feel confident to kind of host your own watch party, right? That's the goal of this, right? Is to get you doing more of this work in your own classroom. So again, thank you to all of you. Thank you to Michael and his fabulous team. Couldn't do it without you guys. Thank you to Latikwa, my colleague, who's always supporting me.
We'll send out the recording immediately after this to the listserv, just so that you have it available if you need to review it before tomorrow. And thank you all, and thank you, Laura, and your entire team. This is an amazing partnership. You do great work. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Could I just ask one more question? I'm so sorry to be
sure
about this.
No, it's fine.
For tomorrow, can I just verify? I'm going to open up a Google Meet and invite the students, my 3rd grade students, to my Google Meet, and then I'm going to present my screen, and then I'm going to join the Zoom with the author. Is that how it works, Michael?
Yes, you can join the Zoom, or there will be a YouTube link we'll send out an hour before. Either one.
Either one. Okay. So in terms of asking her questions, would they be sent in advance if the students had certain questions about her books, or?
I mean, there's going to be a Q&A function, but it's really pretty scripted. We have a couple of questions prepared. I don't know how much room there's going to be to field questions from students live.
Oh, okay. All right.
We've already fielded some kind of on the back end.
Okay, great. All right, very good. Thank you.
I'm going to stop recording.
And if I could just add to that, Kathleen, because I understand